Hi, and welcome to Talent Acquisition Trends and Strategy. Today, we're joined by Anit Arora. Anit, welcome to the show.
Thanks, James. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And before we jump into it today, would you mind sharing with everybody a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, as you said, my name is Anit Arora. I live in Phoenix, Arizona right now. If you look at the weather, it's pretty hot. It's over 100 degrees, average temperatures. But as I said earlier, I used to live in DC metro area. So started my US-based career, I would say, in the DC metro area. So going back, I came here for my master's degree, did my master's in Missouri, got hired by a company based in Virginia, and I started working in Reston, near to where you are right now. Started supporting federal DoD contractors, did for almost 4.5 years, then moved here in Phoenix, Arizona, near to be our families. I've been doing tech recruiting for almost 15 years, all my career, I would say. Just to go a little even back in the history, I did my computer science degree to be a programmer, software engineer. But I was like, did Java programming, got bored. I'm like, nah, I would like to talk to people more. So moved into recruiting. And since then, I've been just doing tech, engineering, product, whatnot. This is my passion. This is what I've been doing. And I'm looking forward to, what's next for me.
Yeah, that's great. And it's funny that you were talking about you actually used to work in Reston, which is right where I am. And it turns out that we went to the same doctor.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Small world, same
Right.
building. Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. I know exactly where you are. And my mom actually has a place a condo like right next to that building, like walking distance. You could practically hold your breath.
Yeah. And you know what I miss? Because I used to live in Fairfax.
Mm-hmm.
I used to drive and I forgot that road. It's like a 1x1 lane I used to take.
Reston
With
Parkway from Reston to,
yeah,
yeah.
I don't think they've expanded to now like a 2 lane, 2x2. But I remember back then it was 1x1. It was like a scenic, literally like $1 million homes. I was like going through every single day back and forth. I'm like, okay, one day maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a nice area for sure. But look, anyways, I want to talk to you about tech recruiting. I know right now you're primarily focused on engineering recruitment at LiveRamp. I would love to just get your thoughts on what you're seeing on the market right now. If you could kind of walk us through, what you were maybe seeing actually, 2021 and how that kind of progressed and what you're seeing right now in the market for companies that are looking to expand engineering teams and recruit engineering talent.
Sure, yeah. Um, a lot has changed in the last 2 years, especially after COVID or pandemic. A lot of companies had to change not just their business models, but also I think recruiting models. So what I think, what I have seen working for product and engineering companies is like they've opened like they're now bounded by location now. They have opened their literally not just borders in the country, but outside also. So I worked for companies in the last 4 or 5 years, which were doing dedicated North America, US-based recruiting. And then they started doing even nearshore, which is US and Canada, Canada and Mexico. So like kind of a nearshoring. Because offshoring was already happening, but they thought, well, they want to keep people in the same time zone, for productivity and collaboration and all that. That affected what I thought like recruiting also, because then they were going out for recruiting sometimes, like near shore. But we as a company, LiveRamp, actually grew because of pandemic. We were hovering around 400 to 500 people pre-COVID era. We are around 1,400 people now. So just in the last 2 to 3 years, we grew by 2.5 times, overall. And as a company, it helped us because if you go to liveramp.com, you will see that we're a data-centric company. So a lot to do with privacy of data disparity. And the biggest thing is identity. So we are recognized as one of the leaders when it comes to identity resolution or identity management, especially in the retail and advertising industries. And that actually helped us to grow. Like now connecting back to why we grew more during COVID era than before, COVID came, we all started staying back home. So instead of going to a restaurant or even grocery pickup, we were ordering online. So if you think about it, so much data started flowing. Companies like Instacart came out of COVID. Who knew or who thought like, okay, we'll be putting online grocery order through Walmart, and doing a curbside pickup. That's how, and that helped us connecting to LiveRamp because so much data started flowing. We became more relevant in the industry because companies kept coming to us in terms of identity, disparity, privacy, and all that. So I think the model is going to keep evolving based on the worldwide conditions, what's happening in the industry and all that.
For sure. So it sounds like, so specifically for LiveRamp, the strategy shifted from, okay, just hiring in the US market to offshoring to nearshoring, Mexico, Canada. It sounds like that was part of the strategy in the early days.
We as a company did not do, we do some offshoring or support from outside, but the company I worked before LiveRamp, they were doing a lot of nearshoring and even offshoring.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Are you seeing, so in light of some of the tech layoffs that are occurring right now, are you seeing the labor market get any looser for engineering talent? Are you seeing increases in response rates, or has it pretty much held consistent with how it was a couple quarters ago?
I think it's both ways. Yes, we're getting responses, especially from those candidates who are getting affected. But then we're also seeing slowdown responses because they don't want to make a move now. They're cautious. So I think it's kind of balancing out. What I have noted, we were pulling data recently, like, okay, our response rate has actually not that high. It used to be. But I think it's more like this cautiousness in the market.
Wow. So you think you had a higher response rate last year in like the height of hiring?
Yes, one of our sourcing leads shared this just yesterday. I haven't looked at the data yet, but they said, their response rate as a team has gone down in the last quarter or so. Comparatively.
Well, that reminds me, I mean, I remember in the early days of the pandemic, a lot of people, if they were employed at a stable company, they were just like, nope, not going. And there was, I think, part of like the, great resignation, if you will, was that pent up demand that people had to switch jobs that maybe they didn't want to do in 2020, right?
Correct. Yeah, I think you're right. Maybe we all went through that cycle. So psychologically, they're like, well, do I really have to go again? Through this similar situation. So I don't know. We are seeing responses from really motivated candidates. And when I talk to them, like, okay, why are you looking? Oh, I think we don't have much funding left, or we're getting some headwinds, from the management. So that's like, okay, so looks like what's going to happen next quarter. That's why you're proactively looking.
Yeah, I could see that too, right? There's a lot of people, you're probably seeing an increase of people that maybe are open to having a conversation but aren't really serious yet, right? Like they're more so just building the connections and just kind of waiting this thing out to see what happens.
Yes, it is happening often now, in my opinion. I remember making offers to say 4 or 5 candidates a month, more than 50 or 60% would say yes, or sometimes 80% of them. But now I see like it's less than 50%. They want to take more time. They want to review more offers. And maybe it goes back to the cautiousness. They don't want to sign offer letter maybe until they are really convinced.
Wow. See, that's interesting. And it makes sense to me. What's really interesting, so just to kind of share with you what's going on in my space. So again, RPO. So tech companies borrow recruiters from us, right? And we do, 40% engineering, product, 40% revenue, 20% G&A. So the whole gamut, pretty much everything for startups and growth stage companies. And we've actually been growing throughout this whole thing. Like our revenue is higher than it's really ever been before. We had our best lead month in June. What's interesting is that a lot of companies in our industry are going through layoffs. They're shrinking. So it's not consistent across the entire industry. And maybe that has to do with customer segments, and then there's a lot of different factors beyond, like, for instance, if a company's, we're about 35 people all in, right? If a company has hundreds of employees, they might be more impacted by macroeconomic shifts because it's like they're more of like the market leader potentially, right? Like if you have hundreds of people out there, you might be more impacted by macro potentially. And then maybe some competitors, if they're working with smaller stage seed series A, they might be more negatively impacted. So maybe we're just like at that sweet spot where we're kind of on the upswing and, we're not quite big enough to be impacted by the overall economy, but we have great customers that are growth stage. So we're not, just working with startups. I don't know what it is, but obviously I would love to pat myself on the back and say it's our strategy and our demand tactics. And of course, like our strategies and our people do help, but I also think, there's a little bit more to it than that. And I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense, right? Like, I think a lot of companies were thinking, okay, when the market shifts, it's going to shift back into an employer market. Recruiting is going to be easier. But the reality is that this is what I always say. It's like, okay, first off, top talent is always going to have the most options in any market condition. So,
true.
I mean, you have to approach talent acquisition from that perspective and not see it as this like transactional light switch. I don't think a lot of companies get that. And then I also think even if they hypothetically pull it off, as soon as the market comes back, those people are going to leave. If you're underpaying, or if you're not, like, you can't take shortcuts and you can't underpay the best people because they're going to find something else, right?
Yeah. And I think it's a great way of keeping those candidates, individuals, and eventually the engineering and tech teams competitive, because if they're going for the best talent, they're going to, in my opinion, they're going to come out with the best product in the market.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's like, whether you're a services company or a product company, people are the primary driver of value, right? Like people have to create the product, right? Exactly, so it's like, that's where it all starts. But yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, even if talent is becoming a little bit more available, the tech industry is still huge. A ton of people are employed by tech. So I mean, these layoffs are still a very, very small percentage of the overall market. And then too, it's like you get more conversations of, recruiters are getting more conversations where people are kind of just putting their feelers out there. People are more cautious. So that kind of, as you said, might be counterbalancing the fact that there might be a little bit more talent available on the market. Not to mention that people are, a lot of these big tech companies are cutting recruiting teams.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And then they're like, oh shit, we cut, but we're not yet in a recession and we still have to hire.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I think it's luckily, like LiveRamp as a company, we have not, we are like, it's business as usual here. We every other month we're doing the town halls, like the leadership is, giving us like what's next, forward looking, all that. So I feel like we are in a good spot. Again, can't predict what's going to happen next 2 quarters, like recession or no recession. Every time I open up news, anything, that's the only thing they're talking about. So, I
mean, at this point, I just try to stay away from headlines. Honestly, I mean, let's focus on what we can control. Nowadays, it's so easy to get overwhelmed, right?
Correct.
Because it's like every time we check our phone, it's this huge catastrophe. And so it's balancing, like, obviously being aware of what's going on around us, but also, we also have to take care of ourselves, right? We have to focus on what we can control. And
data overload or information overload.
Yeah. I mean, it's at some point you really just have to make a decision for yourself on what, how much time you really want to focus on everything else. I think the best leadership teams too they're doing a good job kind of staying the course as much as they can, right? I mean, I guess profitability to some extent determines if they need to make
Yeah.
drastic changes, but or path to profitability at least. But
Yeah.
I think that the best leaders are kind of helping their team not get overwhelmed, helping particularly the executive team set the agenda for continued growth, right? And just helping their companies kind of stay on track, because obviously the more intact the organization is coming out of a correction, the better position they're going to be able to thrive and ride that whole next growth wave.
Mm-hmm.
Versus
True.
companies that cut really, really deep because they have to, because they're so unprofitable, they're going to be less well positioned to take advantage of the full growth wave coming out of a correction, right?
And I think that's where we think as a company, and to your point, James, like that constant communication from the leadership to the rest of the company. Just today, we had our total rewards town hall, and we're as a company talking about how to like do more for our employees than talking about, okay, did you check the news? Do you know what's going on outside? No, I mean, I think the leadership is like, well, we're on track. We're going to keep doing what we're doing, what we're good in, and I think I mean, again, leadership things like, we are positioning ourselves to be more competitive.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the way that I'm looking at it too. It's now's the time to double down. I mean, I'm getting more aggressive with our revenue strategy. I'm not getting more conservative. I see an opportunity because I see other players on the market like taking more of a conservative posture.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, this is our chance. Like, if we want to be the category leader, we need to make moves like a category leader is going to make.
Correct.
Right. And that's kind of been our philosophy. And I think a lot of people didn't anticipate the things that you're saying. Like, yeah, candidates are more cautious, right? A lot more people are just taking time, right? You're not talking to qualified candidates from the perspective they're not qualified as in they're not looking right now, right?
Exactly.
So they might be a good fit, but they're not ready to, to move forward. So all those kind of factors start to, kind of play into the fact that it's still a tight labor market. And we still are seeing strong job gains across the board in the economy.
Yeah, I think there's like a shift, like if one side is losing, the other side is absorbing also.
That's a great way of putting it. I love that.
And as a recruiter, for me, the good sign is, okay, my calendar is booked with leads, with candidates I have to speak with. That's a good sign for me, for my team, for the company, because we are busy hiring. So for me, it's better busy than doing nothing, because I will start doing or thinking something else then,
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the other I think good time for a segue too, just would be to talk about a little bit about DE&I and what you're seeing as effective strategy and tactics to achieve DE&I goals, right? And what maybe if you feel up to it, just kind of sharing a little bit about what LiveRamp is doing to help achieve DE&I goals and outcomes.
Oh yeah. I mean, I personally been involved with DE&I for the last 6-7 years. I'll give reference. Before I came to LiveRamp, I was with Choice Hotels. Pretty big group now. They actually recently acquired Radisson Americas.
Oh wow!
Just this year. So they were really passionate about their DE&I program, and I got an opportunity to actually start my own ERG group there. I got funding and all that. It was a good way of getting FaceTime with the CEO of the company also, because I felt like the CEO of Choice Hotels was really passionate about, getting involved and doing that, self-check, like, okay, what is really going on, all that. And that helped us to not just do an outreach, but bring people, especially in the tech. Tech is, I think, one of the sectors which is always going to be facing this challenge, with the representation and all that. But, outreach, going out, and then it's more about awareness, okay, I know we always look for the qualification on paper, but hiring the right person or right candidate for the team is sometimes more than that. So for that, like companies investing in that area of DNI, not just like having ERG groups, but bringing value to the company, So now coming to LiveRamp, LiveRamp is actually one of those companies which has invested a lot. I would say it's one of those companies I've worked so far, which actually really cares about, it's not just a paper pushing thing, but real effort and all that, and regular involvement. Because sometimes, in the tech, it's always like, oh, did we interview a candidate? It's not just that, but also did we try our best to bring them on board? So it could be like a woman or like minority or race and all that. And also not just that hiring, like bringing them on the team, but also looking from the other side, which is, let's say a woman candidate, when they interview with a company like ours, they also want to see if we have women in the hiring panel or at a leadership, position. So that's where, we as a company, I think have done a lot. And personally speaking, I try to take time from our leadership, like, okay, could you just spend 30 minutes with this candidate? And, just have a conversation to make them feel, accept, like, so they are acceptable, or like, they feel like comfortable, and another thing is, like here, the culture is at LiveRamp is pretty much flat. Like, I can go to my CTO of LiveRamp and have a conversation with them. And the culture here is they will take time out. So that actually makes it easy for us, especially in the recruiting standpoint, to hire people, like where I can go to a candidate. I'm like, okay, you have these questions, you have these concerns. Let me find someone in the leadership. I want you to talk to them for 30 or 45 minutes. And I'll go set up like a Zoom session between them, and on top of that, our leaders are really accommodative. They sometimes even move things around, to talk to a candidate, to make them feel comfortable.
For sure. And I think one of the things that really stood out to me, what you said, is there has to be ideally representation within the interviewing panel. So people want to know that it's an inclusive culture, right? And I mean, the interview panel is a great way to achieve that. And then also on careers pages, right? Putting out video content, particularly from employees that work on the teams that you're hiring for at scale, so that people can get a sense for the diversity that you have on the team, to which is going to influence kind of, okay, does this organization kind of have a balanced perspective, and do they have different perspectives coming to the table, which is incredibly valuable, right? Like that's one of the biggest value adds of working with multicultural teams internationally, and having diverse groups of people work within a team, is that people can come from different perspectives and bring original ideas and creativity, right? That maybe is not going to be as strong if the diversity piece is missing.
Absolutely. And I there are so many studies being done where they say like diversity brings more value, to a team, to the company in the long run. So I think LiveRamp is just not just a believer in that, but also like a doer, so I feel like there is a lot of effort being done with a lot of people here in this area.
Yeah, I hear you. And I question for you about the ERG that you were part of at Choice Hotels. I've heard a lot of mixed reviews. I've heard ERG stories where it goes incredibly well, and then others where maybe not so much. So I'm curious to were there any lessons learned getting the ERG off the ground of, okay, these are the things that we kind of have to check off to ensure that we're going to be able to get the value from this that we want to, and And then I guess after that, it would be good to know, were you able to implement change within the organization based on what you were talking about?
Yeah, that's a great question, James. I feel like having an ERG group and then the catalyst to that to bring a change, in my opinion, is recruiting. Because yes, you have an ERG in the company, but ultimately what we need to do is have more representation, like have more like people or communities coming, working for the company. So, I mean, in my opinion, ERGs, they need to work with recruiting closely to make that happen, because I mean, yeah, ERGs can go and have quarterly or semi-annually events, like let's have fun together, but there has to be like action and then outcome, having that ERG group. But yeah, going back to choice, when I started, although there was a lot of support given by the ERG leaders, even the CEO, as I said, getting FaceTime and then giving the CEO like big picture. So that helped to kick off the group. But then eventually it also helped in going out and talking to people and bring to the company. Because Choice Hotels, I was mostly involved with the tech here in Phoenix. So helped to do outreaches. Like we had a program at ASU, through that, Arizona State University, which is like we were going out and like, okay, well, we're not just a tech company, but we are also, like doing a lot of other things. And as you said, they want to see similar faces, kind of to feel comfortable. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the differentiators too is that what you just mentioned about the CEO directly getting involved, you need executive level buy-in to make it work, right?
Yeah.
So I love that. I love the concept of you can't scale relationships, and executives have to get in there and have real conversations, and you can't just look at a survey.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to get in there and get a pulse on the organization.
Yeah.
And when you stop doing that, like, I think that should be one of the biggest fears of CEOs as they scale. Like, am I going to lose my pulse? Like, if you're not asking that question, I feel like you're just setting yourself up for disaster.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it also, to know like, okay, is leadership really serious about this thing, or, I mean, granted, we all get funding for running a group, but at the end of the day, if there are outcomes, there are results, let's have the other side also, and it goes to the ERG groups also. If the leadership is very much involved, then those ERG leaders need to be really, like showing the outcome, the results, that we are doing the work, and it helps with really good branding also.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, particularly in tech, like, people want, generally speaking, they want to work for, progressive companies, right? Companies that share similar values when it comes to people, right? And people rights and these types of things. So yeah, I agree. It's something that a lot of top talent's looking for as well, right? So it's good from every perspective, right? It works out. So I think too, and one of the pieces of advice I've gotten from a few CPOs is the time to start is always now. Like, the earlier on you start, the better, because if you can build a small diverse group, then when it comes to referrals and representation and being seen as an inclusive culture, it's a lot easier to make that happen from the start, versus if you get to 300 employees, 500 employees, 1,000, and then it's like, all right, let's start working on DE&I. It's it can be a lot more difficult sometimes to really shift the tide, right? When you're already at a late stage of growth, versus if it's part of like your core fabric and culture and values from the jump. So yeah, that was something I actually had not thought about before. And I remember the first time I heard that, I was like, it's just so much sense, right?
Yeah. I think it's like if you're starting a company, day one, goal or vision, like, okay, how can I bring diverse team, or how can I bring diversity from day one, because eventually you want to have productivity, for-profit business, um, so it adds to the value.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Well, look, this has been a ton of fun, and we're gonna have to sign off here. We're coming up on time, but I just want to say, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'd love to have you on the show again next time, sometime
Yeah,
soon.
thanks for having me, James. Pleasure.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And by the way, if people want to find you online, what's the best way to connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn,
Okay.
so you can just put my name in the search, and you'll find me there.
Cool. Okay, good stuff. Good stuff. Well, for everybody else tuning in, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
All
Take
right,
care.
thank you.